The annual vote in the United Nations General Assembly on the resolution demanding the lifting of the US blockade against Cuba will be postponed until next year due to the coronavirus pandemic. The Palestinian Authority has once again denounced Israel's crimes against the Palestinian people and called on the International Criminal Court to investigate the Zionist regime. The UN Special Envoy to Yemen has warned of the risk that negotiations fail to bring peace to the country. From the headquarters of Teleso English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. The Cuban government has announced that the annual vote in the United Nations General Assembly on the resolution demanding the lifting of the US blockade against Cuba will be postponed until next year due to the coronavirus pandemic.
We insist that while the economic, financial and commercial blockade of Cuba that is far from being lifted and which the international community calls for, which has worsened even during this pandemic, Cuba will not stop denouncing this policy in all the venues possible. I think the U.S. government should lift it. It hurts in all aspects and harmful, but it's not in our hands. It's up to something above us, whether they will lift it or not lift it.
Cuban health authorities announced this Wednesday that 33 new COVID-19 cases were confirmed in the past 24 hours.
Out of the 3,235 samples analyzed yesterday, 33 people tested positive for COVID-19 for the SARS-CoV-2 virus. In Cuba, a total of 250,996 samples have been analyzed by molecular biology laboratories, out of which 2,588 people have tested positive for COVID-19.
Guyana's President David Granger and First Lady Sandra Granger were tested for COVID-19 this Monday. In photos posted by the Department of Public Information, a healthcare worker could be seen taking samples from both the President and his wife. According to the Ministry of the Presidency, neither Granger nor his wife have shown any signs or symptoms associated with the novel coronavirus. In Barbados, the Employment Prevention of Discrimination Bill was debated and passed by the House of Assembly this Wednesday. According to the Minister of Labour and Social Partnership Relations, who led the debate, the legislation will ensure the legal framework to tackle employment discrimination.
We are saying to Barbados that we have reached the stage, and maybe long past the stage, where discrimination is a matter that can be condoned. Our people have said that they do not want it. We have agreed with them that it is not something that should be encouraged. It is not something that should be tolerated. And so, Mr. Speaker, the bill before this honorable chamber is a bill designed to prevent discrimination against people in relation to their employment, in relation to their ability to earn a living, in relation to their ability to survive as human beings in this country.
A potential tropical cyclone is developing in the Caribbean and expected to become Tropical Storm Isaias on Wednesday afternoon. According to the National Hurricane Center based in the U.S. state of Florida, as of early Wednesday morning, the developing tropical system was located about 5 miles south of Dominica and 385 miles east of San Juan, Puerto Rico. The potential cyclone has winds of 45 miles per hour and is traveling northwest at 23 miles per hour. The Forecast Centre also informed that the system is expected to continue to move through the Leeward Islands in the next few hours before nearing the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico on Wednesday night and arriving in the Dominican Republic and Haiti on Thursday and the Bahamas and eastern Cuba on Friday. In Chile, the Mapuche community is mobilizing this Wednesday in solidarity with the spiritual leader Machi Celestino Cordova and to call for the release of all Mapuche political prisoners. The Mapuche prisoners have now been on a hunger strike for 90 days. Leaders of different communities and organizations took over government buildings in the municipalities of the Araucanía region of central Chile, demanding the implementation of Article 10 of the International Labour Organization's Indigenous and Tribal Peoples Convention, on the basis of which they are calling for the release of Celestino Córdoba.
The most complicated and complex situation is the hunger strike carried out by the Mapuche political prisoners in different prisons of the country, in the city of Temulco, in the city of Angol, and in the city of Lebol in the Bio region as well. Therefore, as doctors have pointed out, this situation is truly critical for the health of the strikers. And what it puts in evidence is that we have here a big conflict between the state of Chile and the Mapuche people, that began more than a century ago when the state of Chile took over the Mapuche territories through military force and violence, and later started to colonize and impose Chilean culture, which the Mapuche people is not willing to accept.
This Wednesday, the special voter registration process conducted by Venezuela's National Electoral Council in the lead-up to the December 6 parliamentary elections concludes. Electoral authorities began the process to update the electoral register on July 13th under strict biosecurity protocols due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This process aims to ensure that citizens of voting age meet the formal requirements to exercise their right in the upcoming parliamentary elections. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has urged young voters to participate. The Colombian government has extended the national lockdown to curb the spread of COVID-19. The lockdown was extended to August 13th after Colombia registered 10,000 new COVID-19 cases in the last 24 hours. President Ivan Duque pointed out that in the less affected municipalities of the country, the process of reopening would continue, but always avoiding large gatherings. However, in medium and highly affected municipalities, epidemiological control measures will be implemented. Colombia has reported over 267,000 coronavirus cases and more than 9,000 fatalities. And Colombia, the Philippines and Brazil were identified as the countries with the highest number of assassinated environmental activists in 2019. According to a report by the NGO Global Witness, 212 environmental and human rights defenders were murdered last year worldwide. Colombia leads the list with 64 murders, followed by the Philippines with 43 and Brazil with 24. However, the report notes that the numbers could be even higher, as many of these cases are not reported. Most of the killings went unpunished. Global Witness also warned of growing evidence of opportunistic killings during the COVID-19 lockdown, with activists left as sitting ducks in their own homes. And we'll be right back after this short break, so don't go away. Joe Biden, the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee, has criticised President Donald Trump's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as his failing electoral campaign.
That he can't beat the pandemic and keep you safe. He can't turn the economy around and get America back to work. And he is horrifyingly and not surprisingly intentionally stoking the flames of division and racism in this country. But Donald Trump doesn't care. His campaign is failing, and he's looking for a political lifeline. This isn't about law and order. It's about a political strategy to revive a failing campaign.
The Chinese government this Wednesday responded to the United States accusation that Beijing-related hackers had infiltrated the Vatican computer network.
We have emphasized many times that China is a staunch defender of cybersecurity and has always opposed and fought hacking and cyber attacks. Cyberspace is very abstract and it's very hard to trace origins with such diverse actors. When investigating internet-related incidents, we should provide sufficient evidence instead of making baseless guesses.
The Deputy Russian Prime Minister announced Wednesday that Russia plans to begin production of 2 promising novel coronavirus vaccines in September and October.
One of them was developed by the Gamalaya Research Institute of Epidemiology and Microbiology of the Ministry of Health in conjunction with the 48th Central Research Institute of the Ministry of Defense. In August, state registration is planned with a further clinical trial for 1,600 people. The launch of industrial production is expected in September 2020. Another vaccine was developed by the Vector State Laboratory. Combined clinical trials have begun. They are planned to be completed in September, and state registration is also planned in September. The first batch is planned to be produced in October 2020.
And Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered his government to prepare for a possible surge in coronavirus cases. President Putin urged officials to be cautious on easing lockdown restrictions and ensure the stable functioning of the healthcare system while adopting preventative measures to avoid another lockdown. Russia has so far reported over 828,000 COVID-19 cases and more than 13,000 deaths. The number of new daily infections has been steadily falling since mid-May, but remains relatively high, with health officials reporting over 5,000 new cases per day.
The situation remains difficult and can swing either way. This is precisely why we are meeting now, so there is no reason to be complacent, relax and forget the recommendation of doctors. I'm addressing this now to government representatives and to all the citizens of our country. It is necessary to do everything to try to avoid reimposing restrictions, especially large-scale ones, through preventive and proactive measures.
In France, nearly 1,500 people were moved from a vast migrant camp located on the banks of the Saint-Denis Canal on the northern outskirts of Paris. The operation forms part of the government policy to prevent any makeshift camps from being set up in Paris or its inner suburbs. On the banks of the Saint-Denis Canal, many people were waiting to be picked up and taken to provisional shelters. However, according to reports, confusion reigned in the early morning, with the police entering to clear the camp. Volunteers denounced the conditions and the treatment of the migrants.
For some, this is the 10th evacuation. For some, the 5th. For others, the 1st. So the spirits are never happy. They're going to go to places that aren't good in general. They know it because they've already been in gymnasiums. Half know they are going to be out on the street again tonight or next week or in a month. Of course, the thing is to push people out of Paris, and especially out of sight, well hidden so that people think that everything is going well, that there are no more worries in Paris, that migrants are all well housed and well taken care of. But this is not true, as you can see here, because already here they didn't arrive in Paris yesterday. They've been hanging out in France, some of them for a very long time.
Egypt could reimpose the strict preventative measures it had earlier imposed to fight the coronavirus. According to Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, the country has moved towards a gradual reopening of its economy since June, lifting some of the restrictions as part of a plan to coexist with the virus. The PM urged Egyptians to continue to adhere to all precautions, including maintaining social distance and wearing face masks in crowded places, to help the country to keep the daily infection rate low and prevent a possible resurgence of the virus. Egypt has reported almost 93,000 COVID-19 cases, including over 4,000 fatalities. The Palestinian Authority once again denounced Israel's crimes against the Palestinian people before the United Nations this Wednesday and called on the International Criminal Court to investigate the Israeli regime. During a virtual meeting of the UN Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, Ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, stressed that the crimes against the Palestinian people in the occupied territories, including Jerusalem, must be investigated and those responsible held accountable. The ambassador also denounced Israel's expansionist plans, which prevent a solution to the conflict and put the peace of the entire region at risk. An Israeli artist has mocked Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in a reenactment of the Last Supper installed in central Tel Aviv a day after protesters were beaten and bloodied by security forces. Artist Itai Salat said the piece in Tel Aviv's Rabin Square represents the last meal of Israeli democracy. Protests have intensified against Netanyahu over his handling of the coronavirus pandemic and the devastating economic crisis it has caused. The Prime Minister has been accused of leading a chaotic virus containment strategy as cases have surged and economically painful initial restrictions have been reimposed.
This last meal can represent the last meal of the exalted man, the man who died in his heart when the state of Israel beat 1 million unemployed people hungry for bread.
We have more news coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. A new UN Refugee Agency report on migrants who make their way to Libya has found that government officials like border guards, police and soldiers in the African countries they cross are responsible for nearly half of all cases of physical violence against them. The finding, which raises calls for greater accountability, came in a report released Wednesday by the UN Refugee Agency and the Mixed Migration Centre at the Danish Refugee Council, titled "On This Journey, No One Cares If You Live or Die." Based on nearly 16,000 interviews and data collected by the centre, the report found more than 1,000 people died on the journeys across both East and West Africa in 2018 and 2019, making the land route one of the deadliest in the world for migrants and refugees.
The perpetrators of physical violence, and in 47% of the case, the victims reported the perpetrators of violence are law enforcement authorities. Whereas in the past, we believed that it was mainly smugglers and traffickers. Yet, yes, they are key perpetrators of violence, but the primary perpetrators of violence are people who are supposed to protect. So when we say nothing can be done, well, no, something can be done. States have responsibility that they need to discharge in that respect.
The situation is not only in one country. Other side of the Mediterranean have also a big responsibility. We have to understand that countries like Libya, who is in conflict, civil war, people are dying, there is a huge displacement, is not a safe port. So if we call to return people or to have any deal to bring people back to a country that is not safe, I believe there is a big question about how serious we are to reach a solution.
In Yemen, forces backed by Saudi Arabia and separatists sponsored by the United Arab Emirates have reached an agreement to form a joint government in the south of the country within 30 days. According to the resolution proposed by Saudi Arabia, the Southern Transition Council, supported by the UAE, has renounced its rule over the port city of Aden. The war in Yemen, which has caused thousands of civilian casualties and displaced millions, started in 2015 when a Saudi-led military coalition invaded the country to counter the Houthi movement, which controls the northern part of the country, including the capital. Ethiopia on Monday warned Egypt against establishing any military base that could pose a security threat to the Horn of Africa region. The reaction came days after an Egyptian delegation met with Somaliland President Musa Bihi Abdi in Hargeisa, where the two sides discussed Cairo's proposal to set up a military facility in the self-declared state. According to Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Dina Mufti, Egypt, as a sovereign country, has a legitimate right to establish relations with any country in the region, but these relations should not be established at the expense of any other country. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank now has 10 members and 9 prospective members from Africa after its Board of Governors approved the application of Liberia to join the bank. According to a statement by the AIIB Director General for Communications, the bank now has 103 approved members from across the world. Celebrating the 5th anniversary of its establishment, the bank's Board of Governors approved the resolution on Liberia's admission during the annual meeting that opened on Tuesday in Beijing. According to its leadership as a multilateral development bank, the AIIB will not only support its members in Asia, but also take the needs of non-regional members into consideration.
Now, with the support of the board, we, the management, set a target at $13 billion. So far, $6 billion has been of the projects have been approved under the CRF. And I expect the demand is still very high, and we will try to meet the needs under the facility. I would like to do more in other non-regional members. The board set the ceiling for non-regional members at 15%. We still have a lot of headroom to go.
A plane carrying 129 Vietnamese COVID-19 patients from Equatorial Guinea landed in Hanoi on Wednesday afternoon. Upon arrival, the patients were transferred to the National Hospital for Tropical Diseases, along with 100 other passengers and the flight crew, who will undergo a quarantine period for the next 14 days. The Vietnamese government said on Wednesday it was stepping up measures against the coronavirus following the country's first domestic outbreak in more than 3 months. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. For Teleso English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.